I want to start by, I want to acknowledge that the Clyfford Still Museum resides on the traditional and unceded territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and future, and to all of those who have stewarded this land, water, and its inhabitants for generations. We at the Clyfford Still Museum recognize our responsibilities as current residents of this land. We will diligently care for and respect its offerings, are committed to continue learning, and will work to deepen our relationship with the vibrant indigenous communities who continue to uphold their sacred connections to this place. Recognizing this statement does nothing to mitigate the effects of these people's forced removal from their native lands. I encourage everyone listening tonight, both here and online, to take out their phone and donate at least $1 to a Native-led organization working to create systemic change for those communities. Here are a couple of QR codes as suggestions to your direct contributions, and those you can scan on your phone. They include the American Indian College Fund, Native American Rights Fund, and the First Nations Development Institute. My name is Nicole Cromarty, and I'm the Director of Education and Programs here at the Clyfford Still Museum. Tonight, we are going to be exploring the Clyfford Still Museum's Nespelem archival holdings with our staff and community collaborators from the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. As many of you know, in 1937, Clyfford Still co-founded an artist colony in Nespelem, Washington, home of the Colville Confederated Tribes. Still engaged personally with the people there, which we see reflected in the depictions of the community and individuals that he created during his time. 3 of those portraits are currently on view in the galleries, which you'll have to come back and see when we're open in the exhibition. So we are joined by a small audience here in our lobby tonight and online via YouTube where we are live streaming. So first I will introduce Michael Holloman. Hello, who is an associate professor in fine arts at Washington State University. He teaches undergraduate and graduate courses in Native American art history and the studio arts. Currently, he serves as the coordinator of Native American arts, outreach, and education for the College of Arts and Sciences. Holloman has played a critical role in the development of programs, interpretation, and initiatives in the Clyfford Still archives. Michael is an enrolled member of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Indian Reservation. His scholarship focuses on abstract expressionist painter Clyfford Still of the 1930s Nespelem art colony, and also 20th century Japanese American photographer Frank S. Matsuura. Yes, great. He is the proud father of 2 wonderful children, one of you is here tonight, and working artist who continues to exhibit his paintings. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
John Ilo-Cyrus, Sci-I, is the Traditional Territories Advisor of the Confederated Tribes, is a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, and is of the respective Okanagan, Madao, and the Wenatchee tribes. He was born and raised on the Colville Indian Reservation in Omak, Washington. Cyrus carries cultural teachings and histories from his grandmother and extended family that ties him to the lands and waters of the greater Okinawan and Wenatchee Valley regions. He earned degrees from Dartmouth College in History and Native American Studies and a master's in Public Administration at the University of Washington. He currently serves as the Traditional Territory Advisor of the Colville Confederated Tribes, advocating for indigenous rights to ensure that those rights are fully respected. Cyrus seeks to build a better future for all generations to come. Cyrus harvests Chinook salmon at the Icicle every year and can be seen there every spring. You can find a Sci-I camping, hunting, hiking, and reading and salmon fishing with his family. All the way at the end, we have Bailey Placzek, many of you will recognize as CSM's Associate Curator and the Research and Project Manager for Clyfford Still's catalog Raisonné. Placzek has dedicated her last decade to sharing Clyfford Still's art with the world. Select curatorial projects at CSM include Clyfford Still Art and the Young Mind, A Decade of Discovery, Clyfford Still in Denver, and Still Elemental. Placzek's work is connected by her objectives to advance access to collections, promote art's ability to foster human connection to each other and the natural world across time, and break down museum practices to make it more transparent, collaborative, and fun. Placzek received an MA in Art History from the University of Denver and dual BA degrees in Art History and Painting from the University of Kansas. And finally, we have Erin Shafer, who is the Associate Archivist at the Clyfford Still Museum. She is responsible for improving physical and intellectual control of and access to the historical archive collection. Previous to CSM, Erin has worked as an archivist and librarian in higher education. Erin received her Master of Library and Information Science degree from the University of Denver and is passionate about increasing access to archival materials. And then I'd like to pass it over to John to do a quick introduction to one of our special guests that we have in the audience tonight.
I would like to recognize Milton Dewey Davis from the Colville Confederated Tribes. He's from the Chief Joseph Band and Palouse peoples. Serves in our language program, fluent speaker, and all-around great guy.
Thank you so much, John, and welcome, Dewey. Let's all give them all a warm welcome.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicole, for that incredible introduction. I just wanted to start by giving a short introduction and overview of what we'll be talking tonight about. First of all, I'm going to start with kind of some background context on the origins of our project with the Colville Reservation, and then we'll it over to Michael and John to kind of give their some more historical context on the Confederated Tribes of Colville. Then Erin and I will dive into our project when we visited the area back in April of this year, and then we'll hear from Michael and John and wrap it up with some questions, discussion, hopefully leave some time to engage with you all. So before we dive into the project itself, I just wanted to give some background context on its origins. So community engagement has been increasingly important with museums over the past 30 years. I love this quote from museum theorist and administrator Stephen Weil, who always talks about that we must know our communities before we can actually create meaningful experiences. After this has been increasingly significant for museums as we shift away from thinking about these institutions as being about something and more for somebody and our communities. So even though museums have begun to recognize that it's imperative for this kind of work, it's really difficult for several reasons. First, it takes a lot of time and resources for museums to engage in an authentic way and really commit to creating these mutually beneficial relationships. Museums are typically on kind of such a deadline-centric trajectory, and it's hard to step back and not, be in our own museum world all the time. There's many benefits to this work that we just wanted to highlight here. U Select, which is the exhibition that we have up currently. This was the culminating exhibition of our 10th anniversary year, and it was designed to kind of signal to the Denver community that we are committed to this work over the next decade. And we were really excited in thinking about this show to think about what it meant, what community meant for us specifically, and what it could mean for this really unique institution. Collection owned, by the city of Denver. And we're trying to think about what it would look like to curate in a way that engaged our own contemporary networks while also honoring those networks that Still forged in his own lifetime. And our goal was to really draw attention to the ways that those networks intersect and how we can expand upon our own communities by tapping into those resources that Still originated during his life. So, as many of you know, the community voted to select the artworks on view And then each room is really dedicated to one specific community or group of people or place that impacted Still during his lifetime. So the project that we're talking about in here tonight to explore was born from our desire here at the museum to explore what possibilities could exist if we foster that connection with one of those communities that Still initiated nearly a century ago. Still's path with the Confederated Tribes of Colville. 1936, when him and his faculty colleague from Washington State College took a trip to the area up around Nespelem and Grand Coulee to kind of assess the feasibility of beginning a arts program for undergraduate and graduate students at Washington State College in Nespelem. Worth Griffin and Still initially went in 36, and then they returned the following 2 summers in 37 and 38 with students. The majority of the work that we have that Still did at this time is from actually 36, the first summer that he was there. He met many of the individuals there, took a few of their portraits and photograph portraits, and then also drew and sketched many of the people he met, the environs he saw, and the land around that area. Let's see. That's okay, sorry. With Youth Select, we thought that this was a really incredible opportunity to expand upon and deepen our own connection to this community by potentially engaging family members of some of these individuals that Still identified in his portraits. And I've pointed out, to John and Dewey today that I think it's really significant, that Still was inscribing many of these portraits with these individuals' names. And so we had such a great starting point in terms of getting in touch and getting to know these families that and ancestors of these individuals. So we hope to, for the exhibition, hope to verify these identities and gain a better understanding of the context in which they were created, and then hopefully that could potentially lead to conversations down the road about what how we could continue this relationship and what that would look like.
So we began the project by meeting internally to think about how we might explore engagement with the Colville Confederated Tribes and what our goals might be. We were really interested in learning more about the historic and community context of the materials. And as Bailey mentioned, specifically, we were interested in meeting the family members of the individuals in the artworks included in our current exhibition, Youth Select, to uncover new information and perspectives, and then highlight those perspectives within exhibition interpretive content. And as we thought about how we were going to achieve these goals in a discussion with CSM Director Joyce Tsai, we decided to take the opportunity to go and visit Nespelem and explore what collaboration could look like with the Colville Confederated Tribes. So because this project was shaping into something much larger than what we initially anticipated, Bailey and I reached out to Michael Holloman to get his thoughts on the proposed project and whether he would be interested in facilitating our visit. Michael agreed to work with us, so the next steps in the project were to create a formal project proposal, and once that was approved by Joyce, we were able to start planning the trip.
So I think it's important to highlight that our relationship with Michael is longstanding. We began working with Michael back in 2015 or so when he visited us and participated in our One Painting at a Time program, which is the program you see here. He actually discussed one of the artworks that we had on display in the room behind me. And this is just a list of the programs that we've worked on him with over the years. We'd always kind of hoped to one day, use this opportunity and, talk to Michael about what it would look like to connect with the larger community. And so this was that opportunity. So I'm going to pass it to Michael and John to kind of give some background on the community itself.
So one of the things that I wanted to speak about, but before I do, I want to thank Dr. Sy again for the support of this, and the staff and everyone here at the Clyfford Still, because it was a program that I've been looking forward to for quite some time, with the idea of really kind of bringing the connection from the collections here at the Clyfford Still that are now available to the public back to the audience in Eastern Washington, at Washington State University, where I'm teaching currently, and on the Colville Indian Reservation. But to do that, it took a lot of work to really organize something like this, to kind of re-engage this historic project that was initiated, on the Colville Indian Reservation by Clyfford Still and staff back in the 1930s. And it's something that has been important to us in the region, I think, that we've been looking for. But at the same point, the benefits far exceed just what we've been doing there, with the opportunity to really add dimension and necessary information and relationships with the collections that we have here. And so the images that we see right now really kind of in some ways reflect that particular moment in time that had taken place back then at Nespelem, and in some ways the opportunity that we have to re-engage that and the possibilities that could ensue.
So if I could provide sort of a backdrop of how this, some of these special events happen within the Nespelem art colony. The Colville Confederated Tribes are a collection of 12 different tribes in that Pacific North, east of the Cascade Mountains into eastern Washington, British Columbia, and Oregon, northeast Oregon, I guess. And they all had, in common that Columbia River that provides so much for us, and that they were connected through that river in a lot of ways. And as that reservation developed, they signed their executive order in 1872, July of 1872. More and more tribes were moved to that reservation that hadn't signed treaties, that were still outliers, I guess. And some of the tribes that moved to the reservation later were the Moses Columbia, the Palouse, and the Chief Joseph Nez Perce. And each year we gathered in numbers, but it is today still a collection of tribes, 3 different language groups that continue, in their ways of following that life cycle of those traditions that were passed down to them. And to see snapshots in time through Clyfford Still, we'll get to more of it later, but just meant so much to our people on the reservation. It really did.
So John and Michael were instrumental in developing our itinerary and helping facilitate this visit. We also ended up expanding our scope to spending time at Washington State University as well. And as the project was coming to fruition, we discussed Michael's thoughts about our initial goals and actually decided to take a step back and reevaluate. Michael pointed out that if we would like to initiate future partnership with the Colville Confederated Tribes and start building a meaningful and equitable relationship, then we should not go into this leading with our own agenda. So rather than establishing goals based on exhibition deliverables, we actually decided to shift the project focus to one of listening and sharing. So our new goals of the trip were to introduce ourselves and the museums to the community. We wanted to learn more about the individuals in the collection materials related to the Colville Confederated Tribes, and supplement our records with any additional information we learned about Clyfford Still's time both at Washington State University and on the reservation. We also wanted to share the materials we have in our collection related to the Colville Reservation. So we gifted reproductions of a select group of artworks and archival materials to the family members of the individuals depicted in Clyfford Still's portraits, as well as to the Colville Tribal Museum. Lastly, we wanted to lay the foundation, engage interest, and possible future collaborations between CSM and the community. So our approach to the visit was to go in with a listening and learning mindset. We wanted to listen to community perspectives and their reasons for possibly engaging with the museum. If the community was open to starting a relationship with us, we understood that it would take time to foster, and we'd want to make sure it was equitable. Lastly, we worked with Michael to understand and ensure that we respect cultural protocols and etiquette. So Bailey and I will go into more detail here shortly, but I did just want to provide a really quick overview of what we did on the trip. The trip was essentially split into two parts. The first part of the trip was spent in Pullman, Washington, on Washington State University's campus, where we reviewed artworks by Worth Griffin and conducted research at the Washington State University Manuscripts Archives and Special Collections. The second part of the trip was spent in Grand Coulee and Nespelem. This is where we met with John Cyrus and the members of the Colville Confederated Tribes at the Lucy F. Covington Government Center. We were able to tour Nespelem with both Michael and John, and we met with Jackie Cook, a representative from the Colville Tribal Museum, and was able to get a tour of the museum there too.
So I just wanted to drop this in. This is when we first arrived in Pullman. We drove around for a while just to get a sense of the town. And I was just immediately struck by how much of this landscape and area immediately came to mind from stills, paintings, and artworks. This is just one example. This is Main Street in Pullman and PH 449 and its related drawing, which are actually currently on view upstairs, which we later kind of identified. We actually ate in the red building in the restaurant there, which is inside a Clyfford Still painting, which is kind of...
That's wild.
So on our first full day, Bailey and I spent some time at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum on the campus of Washington State University to see how works in their collection by Worth Griffin, Stills Department Chair and co-founder of the Nespelem Art Program, so to see how his works might inform works in our own collection. So the images shown on the slide outlined in green are from the Jordan Schnitzer Museum and are artworks by Worth Griffin. The other works are by Still and are in our own collection. The Griffin works reaffirmed what we already knew about these individuals' identities, but also showed us some more context for some of Still's drawings of the Nespelem environment.
We also learned a lot of new information. So on the left, you see an exhibition list of there's about 20 The exhibition presumably happened sometime in the 30s, but we haven't been able to find out anything more about this exhibition other than this list, which is in our archives. A lot of these artworks listed were not documented by Still or photographed, and so we had no record other than the name of the individual. And so luckily, we found that a lot of these individuals we knew that Jordan Schnitzer had a lot of these paintings, but some of them we had never seen. And so we, worked with their amazing collection staff to pull out a lot of those paintings so we could, photograph and document, and especially those that we hadn't seen and didn't know they had works of. And this is just really significant because it shows what Still's paintings of these individuals probably looked like. If you can you go back one?
Yeah.
If you look and see just how similar Worth Griffin's and Still's artworks are, they obviously were done at the same time in the same setting. And there was that photograph that Michael showed earlier of, many art students creating portraits and painting and drawing one individual. So I think that those portraits are significant because we know what to look for now.
So then we spent some time speed researching in the Washington State University archives. We found additional photographs of individuals depicted in Clyfford Still's works and other new archival materials as well. For example, the photographs here on the left and right of the slide confirm the identity of the individual in the center as Willie Red Star Andrews, who was previously identified by scholar Patricia Failing, who has visited the area and researched Still's time in Nespelem for the Clyfford Still Museum.
On the second full day, we drove about 3.5 hours up to Cooley Dam and Nespelem. And we planned to spend the morning at the Nespelem Government Center where John had arranged our meeting with some of the community members. But on the way, I couldn't help but snap all these photos of the landscape that we saw, and it just really felt like around every corner I was looking at the source of one of Still's artworks. For instance, on the left, you see my snap of the modern day Cooley Dam compared with Still's photograph of the dam under construction from about 36 to 38. And you could see that it's roughly the same vantage point by the horizon line here. And then on the right, it's a random street in Grand Coulee that I actually made Erin slam on the brakes and back up so I could snap this picture because it reminded me of the infamous Antiques Roadshow painting done by Still at this time. So that was really cool.
This is a photo of me standing in front of the Lucy F. Covington Government Center in Nespelem, where our meeting with the members of the Colville Confederated Tribes took place. In this picture, I am holding the reproductions that we gifted to the family members. So Bailey, Michael, John, and I set up in the conference room at the Government Center and laid out the gifted reproductions that we brought for family members to look at and discuss with us in a very much an open house style meeting. We also pulled up Luna, our digital asset management system, on a projector to show more of Clyfford Still's works completed or influenced by his time on the reservation. So family members came at various times, and we were able to meet the descendants of the individuals in our collection materials.
Yeah, so in this and the following few slides, we've highlighted a few of the notable reactions from some of the individuals that we met. It was just an incredibly moving and emotional experience, I think, for, at least me. I don't want to speak for you, but just seeing these individuals' very, instantaneous reaction to seeing the faces of their grandparents or, their aunts and uncles. This one I was particularly struck by Deidre Ellsworth's reaction to seeing her grandfather's face. This work is actually on display upstairs, and Deidre has given us permission to reproduce her words on the wall upstairs, which I think just really creates such an amazingly vivid image of this human being in the 30s.
So Dewey Davis is shown here on the left alongside a drawing by Clyfford Still of Dewey's grandmother, Agnes. Dewey, we just want to say thank you again for coming down. We're so excited. At the top right, and he's holding a reproduction of Cleveland Kamiakin, and Darlene Saxon next to him is holding a reproduction of Willie Red Star Andrews.
This is Vance Cleveland, whose grandfather is Cleveland Kamiakin here, and his brother Stretch also. We met and said this amazing quote about giving them a sense of their history, these portraits, which I was moved by. So after that meeting, which took most of the morning and into the early afternoon, John and Michael took us up to drive around Nespelem and the area around the town, and not many of the original structures still exist, but you still see the similarities in terms of the landscape and even just kind of the energy and the aura, I think still really captured the mood of these areas in his drawings.
So this was the only structure we felt comfortable assuming might be the same as the one depicted in Still's drawing here on the right of Mary Auhai's house. We were directed to this structure by the locals once we showed them this drawing, and they recognized it as a building that had since been turned into a church. So that wraps up the overview of our trip. I would now like to pass it to John to hear his thoughts and perspectives.
Thank you. I would like to start out by once again thanking you all, the staff, for taking this on and coming out to visit the families. You truly have an amazing staff, and your effort here is superb. In terms of the reaction from the families, in some ways it was always a myth that, you know, you'd talk to them like, oh yeah, I think I heard about the Nespelem archon, yeah, you know, and I said, please come down, you know, they're going to be here, and let's, you know, they have some pictures that they would like to show, and we set it up for our community. You know, we're not out of the pandemic yet, but this was one of the first times that we gathered, and we tried to stagger out the time frame so that, you know, people could come in. There wasn't everybody there all at the same time, so they had the ability to really spend time with those pictures and share their reactions and their emotions, because it was really emotional time, and those folks still talk about it. It really touched their hearts, and they're very thankful that you would undertake this. So that would be the impression I think we had.
One of the things I think about, you know, with this is that we can't help, of course, but see things from where we are, you know, today, and it takes a little bit to kind of go past our own experiences. But one of the kind of things I want to point out about this, of course, this was still the Depression. This is before World War II. The status of the people on the Colville Indian Reservation was politely impoverished. It was challenging, and the amount of people that had a camera were very few, very few, to be able to document themselves. And so the ability for some of these people to see images of their grandparents, their uncles, their aunts when they were younger, images of them that they'd probably never seen them at that time, meant so much to them. And so the emotion within that was very real and very important, as it brought back you know, their memories and the love of these people that were historically and still are very important to our communities, that have passed on so much. And I'll use that as a segue in some ways, is that, you know, as a faculty member at Washington State University, we're a land grant university, and so much of our values as a land grant is the importance of our relationship with the communities that exist within the area that we reach out to in the inland Northwest. And part of that really committed by the university is within the tribes of the region. And we have memorandums of agreement with tribes throughout the inland Northwest and even into Puget Sound throughout the state of Washington. And the reason, of course, is it's important to us to have a relationship that allows us to work together. As you know, we talked before, the idea that working with the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, it really was never my duty to speak for the tribes. I could be the liaison, help with that, and surely was willing to and wanting to. But at some point it followed our relationship that the Clyfford Still Museum have that official relationship with official representatives from the tribe. And so that was put forth, and then John and others were able to uphold that. And that's very important for Washington State University and how we reach out to tribal communities and work with them, and obviously very important to the Clyfford Still Museum. And one of the things that I think about with this project is it's not just what we're trying to build now and starting to, and the commitments to that, because it's a commitment. It takes resources, it takes people's time. And I appreciate all that commitment that people, you know, put forth in that, because in the end it allows us to reach out to the next generation, to those future generations. As we see here, I do a lot of educational outreach at Washington State University, and we work with a lot of tribal youth that come to Washington State University for the potential, the idea, inspiring them not just to become maybe potential future Cougs, but to go to college, that they to get them to believe that there's the future of colleges for them if they want that, whether it's at WSU or not. And I think this kind of relationship that we're working with, thinking about, looking at the Nespelem Art Colony, historically is also an opportunity as we've developed partnerships with the George Schnitzer Museum of Art at Washington State University, the Confederated Tribes. I absolutely am not going to lie. I imagine and I want to believe that there's continual future partnerships, not just for tribal youth, but for youth to be able to engage their ideas and understandings of Native history within the inland Northwest and throughout the country. And so, these are paintings that the students did that I worked with them on there at WSU. And so they imagined the possibility if they were exposed more with Clyfford Still's work.
All right, so we have some time for questions for any of our panelists. And we're also taking questions from YouTube, so I'll give a little time for people to sign in and type their comments. But while we wait for,
I was just going to say, I could add something, just
yeah.
historical context, something to think about the time Clyfford Still spent with the Colville Confederated Tribes. 36, 37, 38 are crucial changes going on during that time. They complete the Grand Coulee Dam in 1940 that eradicate our salmon run, which was like 70% of our diet. During that time, they were mandated to develop a new style of government that was mandated by the government, an IRA type of government. And we still hadn't done that. They mandated it in 34, but we refused to do that because we wanted to hold on to our traditional leadership ways. Both men and women had been having rules. So it was a crazy time of change. And so it's fascinating to see he captured people during that time. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to the artist community in the immediate years after, 36, 37?
Well, it expanded. They kept promoting it. They had promotion that brought people as far as New York that came all the way out. So it was people from around the country that traveled. And so with that, it was an opportunity for people to come to the inland Northwest. There was, without question, promotion, come see the Native people. There was some information, before they pass. So there was this, they were following, this kind of notion, this trope of Native people will disappear in time, soon enough. So as a promotion of their colony, come be with, and see these people. And this continued on until, of course, World War II broke out, and that was the end of that. And there was so much more on society's mind. But it was, as Jeff Creighton, who wrote the book, a moment, it was a short moment in time in some ways. And I recall, as John brought up, talking with my family, and it was something kind of remember that at the agency. And that's, at Nespelem is the tribal agency. We're a very large reservation. We're as large as some of the smaller New England states in land. And so people would come from, across the reservation, a lot of times by buggy, to go and meet with the federal officials. It was still run by an Indian agent, and they had to meet with the Indian agent at times if they were going to get resources or ask for other things. And so people would come back and forth, but a lot of the Nez Perce, the Joseph Band, lived in Nespelem. And so that's where you had that. But it was also a time where, which we didn't mention, when they were there was really quite an interesting time in the summers because they had the 4th of July powwow. And so, which we still have, and we didn't get a chance to get people from the Clyfford Still to come back, maybe next time. But they were being exposed to people from around the inland Northwest that would come and stay and camp there during the powwow. So it was interesting, and I think the students surely had a remarkable opportunity to engage communities that they might not have. For some of them, even though it was Eastern Washington or the inland Northwest, you still had reservations that were separate from the other communities. So the two didn't always interact. And so for students to have that opportunity, I think that was some of the fascination and promotion. Now, if I was my class, I'd be picking on students.
Oh, this is just for the online folks.
Oh.
Yeah.
I saw the crayon drawing with a number of individuals sitting, and then juxtaposed with one of Still's abstractions. And I was just wondering, we didn't spend much time with that slide, whether there were notes from Still himself, whether he was using the verticality of the Indian weaving blankets as an influence, the verticality of his compositions or not. It's a coincidence that they're on the same slide.
Or not a coincidence.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't leave any notes about that specifically, but, I think that that's something that, anyone who has spent time with this collection and has seen these pastel works that he did, especially those with these groupings of figures with these incredibly vibrant, saturated colors, and he's simplifying the blocks of colors on their clothing in a way that is so reminiscent of his later pastel works and some of his later abstractions, and I think that we've made several people have made those connections throughout, our history here at the museum. But, I showed it to John earlier today, and he was really struck by, he said, I really think it's important for people in the Colville community to see that and to see like how that impacted, because it obviously, had an impact on his work, not just, in the years following, but throughout over the course of the rest of his life.
Now they're warming up.
I was wondering if you could speak more to the importance of the dam. And I know that you mentioned this trope about communities disappearing. Was it known at the time that the dam presented some kind of existential threat to the community? How was it pitched to the community, and is that what attracted Still to this area specifically? Because I can't help but notice that the dam has been central to this presentation. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
In short, the tribal people knew that this could have a tremendous impact and had petitioned the government in many ways to ensure that there's fish passage or how are our fish going to get by. As a practical matter, later on, I think there were actual tribal members that worked there. But, it is something that, I can't speak for if Clyfford Still was capturing some of that, but I know the dams were, enigmatic of everything that happened. Half of that dam is built on our land without our consultation. at the same time, we had a high rate of young men joining the Army, the Air Force, at greater rates than any other group in the United States to fight for this country, because they felt like that flag represents our land too. So, and they needed that electricity to produce those planes for that war effort. So it's a different kind of patriotism. It's more of just a love of the land, protecting our land. And that was our responsibility. So you have this huge dichotomy of knowing that this is going to destroy us, but how do we maintain and still survive? I mean, it's...
So the dam is still a topic of interest amongst the community?
Yes, definitely. Yep, because it's still blocking our salmon over almost 90 years now.
Didn't they just find, or wasn't it when we were there, they had just, seen salmon in the area for the first time in 80 years or?
So we have been working really hard on restoring those salmon runs and using today's science to prove that the salmon, once they get above those dams, know exactly where to go. 2, that it's feasible. And the 3rd, just convincing the federal government and their agencies to start the process of building fish passage. And it's something that was promised in those original agreements, that we'd always have access to our foods, and salmon was the main one. And it's tough trying to convince organizations, governmental entities that make a lot of profit off of just producing hydropower electricity, the cheapest power in the world, that also irrigates the Columbia Basin, that feeds the world with cheap potatoes and cheap agriculture, and no benefits. We pay 3 times the rate for electricity on the reservation compared to on the other side of the reservation. You explain these things to people and they're like, how can that be? And it's like, we're trying to tell you, this is, it's an issue and you need to rectify it. Find some way to move, and we're using our science, our dollars to show that salmon can make it over there.
We have a couple questions from our online audience. They're actually related. So there's interest in how many works Still made during his time in Nespelem. And I think this is a related question, but from someone else. Does CSM have most of the work that Clyfford created during his time there, or is it held in other collections as well?
So I think he made between 65 and 80 works on paper in Nespelem that we have here. And then, I think there's maybe a handful, 4 or 5 paintings. And yes, we do have the vast majority of works that he created there that we know about. That list, that exhibition list, there's about 20 works on that list that he created at the time that we don't know where they are. They're lost. And then we know of about 2 others that he did document that we do not have. So yes, we have the vast majority.
As far as archival materials, we have a handful of photographic materials, so that includes negatives and prints, about 7 or 8 total, specifically on the reservation or the land of the reservation, and then also we have a handful of prints from his time in the Grand Coulee area of the dam, and as well as a set of field notes.
Can I add to that real quick?
Yes, please.
And maybe just for the audience in that, I think what's also really important is with the collections coming here and the processing and being made available for the public is really quite remarkable, because people had known for decades that Clyfford Still was a part of the Nespelem art colony, but there wasn't any evidence of that. There was always kind of a mystery. Where's the stuff? And it kind of within the region, there was always this, maybe one will show up. But as I'd mentioned to people before, there's not one piece in the inland Northwest at any of the museums or that collections of his while he was there. So that seemed quite shocking. But once the Clyfford Still Museum opened here and they started to process and go through, and these became known, it's been a great opportunity and has really been a benefit for not just people interested in Clyfford Still's work, but really for larger communities, obviously, which we're talking about this evening.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions in the back. And thank you to our collections team who were able to open up our research lab before the program tonight so we could see some more of that material this evening.
Thank you so much for speaking with us this evening. One of my questions is, can you all speak to some of the different ways that you would like to continue this mutually uplifting and beneficial partnership, what that may look like or what you're hoping for in this partnership?
I would say you guys should start.
Okay. Well, you know, being in education, and as I'd mentioned, I think the opportunity to engage youth and that with the ability to pursue their interest in the arts is just something that I can't deny. I think not just making art, the idea that they can engage in their understanding of art history. I want to really reflect, I think, you know, like so many youth, but tribal youth in particular, you know, the arts are so important to them. And to have that opportunity to be affiliated with an institution like this, that's so important in American art and world art history, is just a dream come true. And so to expand that, to have students from here maybe make their way at some point out to Nespelem and Washington State University and that, and vice versa, students from that to come out and be able to have the opportunity to learn about art and be involved here maybe as docents or you know, interns. I have a lot of ideas about how wonderful that would be for them, and because I can only imagine, you know, that would be something that once again just really gives future generations an opportunity to really engage Clyfford Still's work in meaningful ways.
Just on the tribal side, I think it's so important for those families to see their relatives and know and acknowledge, like, we're still here. And that, you know, there's so much power in that now. You know, there's so many people there that still, they've heard about this now, and they want to come and see this. So I have a feeling like there's a lot of family members that want to see this.
And I also just think, you know, Erin and I and Michael have talked about how we can, you know, create links between, you know, online resources. So our, you know, databases and images are accessible to not only Washington State, but, you know, all of that, those amazing platforms that they've created up there. And so there's some sort of cross collaboration digitally, I think is exciting.
You took my answer.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say from the archives perspective, I think it would be really amazing to have some type of collaboration, either, you know, with Washington State University archives, with their rich information that they have, or even, you know, if it's possible to work with the tribal archives, you know, anything like that could be really interesting.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yes.
Julie had something too.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to jump in and say that I think, you know, on a kind of very broad philosophical level, I think this is a kind of conversation, a relationship that exemplifies the things that I think we must do with museums. They are not merely repositories. They are not merely, you know, treasure chests. They have, and all of the objects in our collection reflect a particular history and, you know, reflect a particular time you know, out of which they were made, but they also become activated each time they're brought into view. They take on new meaning every time it engenders a new network. And so, you know, on a kind of broad philosophical level, I think it's really important for us to hold that as a value, that every object that is brought into this world allows us to see these relationships anew.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say that I'm, you know, thankful and honored to be asked to come down here and partake in this. And I think the Clyfford Still Museum and the staff for, you know, contacting, you know, the Colville tribe, and thanks to John and Michael as well. And you know, many of these paintings and drawings is my family. You know, many of those that were drawn are Chief Joseph Band and Nespers and Palouse. You know, I was raised by my grandmother Agnes Andrews, Willie Red Star Andrews' daughter. You know, really made me wish that my grandmother could have seen, you know, these paintings and that, you know, picture of her dad, and many of the others are, you know, was her close relatives. And you know, there's an old, like kind of like a belief that many of our old people, they didn't want to be recorded, you know, audio, you know, because it was like a belief that their voice or video was kind of like be held them back. So there's many pictures of my grandmother where she's not looking directly at the person taking a picture because of that. It's like an old belief, you know, that many of our old people still follow. But I just want to again give thanks, and to also, you know, reiterate what John said, that we are still there. You know, those of us that are Chief Joseph Band members, you know, maybe many people think, you know, they hear Chief Joseph and they think Idaho. Well, Chief Joseph wasn't from Idaho. He was from northeastern Oregon. And that's who we are. We call ourselves Chief Joseph Band, but in the language, you know, we call ourselves Wama. And that's what we are. You know, we are people of that country. And again, it's an honor to be asked to come down here and partake in this and to help, you know, identify in any way that I can. And for me, I can't help but when I see a drawing or a picture to remember their Indian names, you know, as a person, as a human, their Indian names. That's their real identity in how I see it. But again, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and it feels like that's a good place for us to end. Thank you all so much for this presentation. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.